I'm certain that at some point in your life you've played Snakes and Ladders, or if you're an American, Chutes and Ladders. And that difference, snakes versus chutes, is a surprisingly interesting one. In both versions you climb up a ladder, and in the American version you slide down a chute, or a slide. Makes sense, right? But around most of the rest of the world we slide down a snake. Why? Well, snakes and ladders originated in ancient India, just like chess did. But the two games share more than that, as both games were designed as teaching tools. Chess was originally designed to teach military strategy, and ancient snakes and ladders, called Moksha-Patam, was designed for teaching morals. This beautiful piece is a Moksha-Patam board, and as you can see, we have lots of snakes as well as representations of deities. These gods are offering religious instruction to the players about karma and leading a good life. Follow a virtuous life and you'll climb the ladders towards the gods. But if instead you indulge in the vices of life, you'll move away from the gods, sliding down on the backs of snakes. So why snakes? Well, today I'm going to tell you all about the sacred and deadly snakes of the devotional religions of ancient India, and why they could very seriously lead you down the wrong path in life if you don't take heed. Hello, I'm Sushma Jansari, and I'm the curator of the fabulous new show, Ancient India Living Traditions. Welcome to my corner. The first object we're going to look at is an incredible sculpture of the elephant-headed god Ganesha. Some of the objects we have here with us today, but others are not here, and for a very good reason. They've already been installed in the exhibition. Now, Ganesha is beloved by Hindus, and he's also worshipped by some Jains and Buddhists as well. You might look at his attributes: the dish of sweets, the prayer beads, the broken tusk, and the elephant goad. Most people are distracted by his dancing, his attributes, and his beautiful elephant head. What they tend to miss is a snake. The body is tied around his torso, and above his shoulder rises a hooded cobra. Nagas and Naginis are ancient male and female sacred serpents, and Nagarajas are serpent kings. These are some of the earliest deities to be venerated in ancient India and to be shaped into huge monumental stone sculptures and tiny little terracottas as well. If you go to any small towns or villages in India today, you will often see beautiful sculptures of these sacred serpents placed beneath trees or beside ponds or other bodies of water. That link between sacred cobras and water is really important. Water is vital. It's the difference between life and death, and having lots of snakes around is a good thing. It basically means you've got an excellent harvest, because snakes eat rodents and frogs, well, the hooded ones do anyway. And if there are plenty of rodents and frogs, it means there is lots of food for them to feed on, which means your harvest is doing really well. There is enough water to give it adequate nutrition. If there are not very many snakes, you've got a problem. Either the rains have failed, or there's been so much rain, your crops will be washed away. Snakes are also associated with other natural features in the landscape, for example, termite mounds. And there's an incredible sculpture at the British Museum. It's a railing pillar that once would have been erected around an enormous Buddhist stupa, and a stupa is a monument constructed over relics. It's a sacred shrine. And this beautiful railing pillar has one of the earliest depictions of a snake emerging from a termite mound. But not only that, it's being handed offerings by a kneeling figure. And it's an incredible moment because, once again, this is something that still very much happens in contemporary India. And you will often see termite mounds splashed with these beautiful colours and venerated as well. Vishnu is one of the most powerful and widely venerated gods in Hinduism, alongside Shiva with his piled up matted hair and Devi, the powerful female goddess. And Vishnu is closely associated with the rescuing of the earth from calamity. And this is actually a really famous representation of Vishnu. You can see that you've got a big coiled up snake. See all the coils of the snake around the bottom. And you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 heads rising above him and sheltering his head here. And he's not asleep, he's actually in yogic slumber, because this moment marks the time when he is resting on the coils of an incredible cosmic serpent, Anantasesha, who is himself resting on the ocean of milk. And this is the time between creation and destruction, a time when everything is at peace. And you can see that here, this incredibly powerful snake is in many ways subservient to Vishnu, because this sacred snake has been tamed. In fact, he's using his own body to carefully cradle Vishnu. The same scene that you can see here is also carved into this object. You can see Vishnu lying down here upon the serpent's body, and the serpent's heads all rearing up above his head here as well. But what you might be surprised to find, that this object is actually an ammonite. This type of ammonite is called a shaligram, and they're found in one part of the world, in the Kali Gandaki River Gorge in Nepal. Normally, they would just be collected, they might be incorporated into your home shrine or into a temple, but this one unusually is carved. I love this object because it's so unexpected. You see this one side and you assume, it's just something carved into stone, and it's only once you turn it over that you realise it's an incredibly ancient ammonite, a fossil. What's quite incredible is that they are widely believed to be a naturally occurring form of the god Vishnu, because the beautiful coils of the ammonite are believed to resemble one of his divine weapons, the chakra, or the spinning disc. One of Vishnu's incarnations is the very popular god Krishna. And there's a wonderful story, in fact, one of my favourite stories, that concerns the god Krishna and, of course, a snake. Kaliya was a huge and divine serpent, and he lived in the river Yamuna, and he was so poisonous that the waters of the river practically writhed with his venom for miles in either direction, so that no other creatures could live in this water. Now, one day, Krishna and some of his friends and Radha, they were all playing a ball game by the side of this river. And unfortunately, the ball fell in the river, so Krishna went to retrieve it. Kaliya grabbed Krishna and dragged him down to the bottom of the river and wrapped his coils around him. But Krishna was way more powerful than this sacred serpent. And so he took on the weight of the universe, and he jumped on Kaliya's heads and stamped on them. Now, Kaliya began to die, and so his wives came rushing up and begged Krishna to spare his life. And Krishna agreed to spare his life, but on one condition, that Kaliya left the river and took his poison with him, and creatures could live in it again because there was no more poison. But the really important part of the story here is that you've got a Hindu deity literally showing you that he can dominate and is more powerful than one of these sacred serpents. And that's a theme that we are going to see in other stories, in fact in Jain and Buddhist stories. Now, this is a very beautiful bronze image of a Jain enlightened teacher. Now, Jainism actually arose around the same time as Buddhism, about, just over 2,500 years ago in northern India. In Jainism, there are 24 enlightened teachers who are human, not divine, and this is one of them, and his name is Parshvanatha. All Jain enlightened teachers are shown in one of two meditation poses, either standing or seated. And this one, as you can tell, is standing. And you will always be able to recognize Parshvanatha because he will always have his snake canopy above his head. And this is actually from a really wonderful story. It's a very similar story in both Jainism and Buddhism, because in both cases, these huge divine snakes have been brought in as protectors of these enlightened teachers. And for the story of Parshvanatha, he was meditating, and unfortunately a malevolent being sent a host of spirits and a great rainstorm to try and disturb him from his meditation and to prevent him from reaching enlightenment. And so a sacred snake called Dharanendra, the Nagaraja, the snake king, came, and he raised his snake hoods above Parshvanatha's head to protect him from the storm so that he could continue meditating, and eventually he reached enlightenment. And what I particularly love about this sculpture is that if you look behind him, you can see Dharanendra winding his way above Parshvanatha's back and then raising his hoods above his head. So all Jain enlightened teachers have a male and a female nature spirit attendant. And you can probably tell here, Parshvanatha's male nature spirit attendant is Dharanendra, the king of snakes, and his female attendant is Padmavati, the queen of snakes. Padmavati is an incredibly powerful goddess, and she is worshipped in her own right as a protectress. And if you look closely, in one of her hands, you can see a shield. And all around Padmavati, you can see snakes. She's holding one in her hand here with many heads. There's one coiled by her feet. There's another rising above. And if you look more closely still, just above her head, you can see a small image of Parshvanatha seated in meditation. Now, Padmavati can protect you from all manner of things if she's adequately appeased. And one of the things she can protect you from is the deadly snake bite. Because these serpent deities, they have two sides to them. On the one hand, they can protect you. On the other hand, they can inflict the deadly snake bite. But if you pray to Padmavati, she will be able to protect you. Now in this story, the Buddha had been meditating for 7 days under the Mukhalinda tree, and during this time there was a huge storm which threatened to disturb his meditation. And so down from this tree came another sacred snake, and his name was also Mukhalinda. And Mukhalinda coiled his body around the Buddha and raised his hoods above his head to protect the Buddha so that the Buddha could continue his meditation. The story of the Buddha meditating while a storm is raging is very similar to the one that we heard about for Parshvanatha. Now, unlike Parshvanatha, the Buddha had already achieved enlightenment, so he was no longer Siddhartha Gautama. He was now the Buddha, which means the enlightened one. And you'll often see this kind of representation where you've got the snake coils below and the snake hood above, and that's the story that's being told through this sculpture. In the ancient past and all the way up to the present day, snakes are also carved onto sacred buildings. Here they function as protective symbols. You can see this mighty serpent rearing up with all of its hood spread, ready to attack and bite anyone who might disturb the sanctity of the site, the sacred relics contained within, or its very human devotees. Snakes have been part of Indian religious life for the longest time. In fact, they're even mentioned in some of India's most ancient sacred texts, like the Rig Veda, which might date to about 1400 or 1200 BCE. So when you see Hindu, Jain or Buddhist devotional art, always look closely to see if you can spot a snake, because more often than not, you probably will. And just remember, these incredibly powerful and potent sacred serpents, they can bestow riches, fertility and much wealth. But if not adequately appeased, they can also bestow the deadly snake bite, so beware. You can see all of these incredible sacred images in the new exhibition, Ancient India, Living Traditions, which is open now.